to have a lot of purpose, a lot of the time we're busting through and we're not taking in the fruits of our works as it happens. And that's what gives it the meaning.
Hello and welcome, fellow human. My name is Zachary Stockill, and you are listening to Humans in Love, a podcast that looks at culture, relationships, and personal development from unconventional perspectives. Join me as I dig into the question of how people like you and I might get more out of life and love. Thanks for being here. Hello friends, Zachary Stockill here, speaking to you today from the island of Siargao in the Philippines, which is easily one of the most beautiful places I've ever been. Just a gorgeous little island here in the Philippines. It's a strange sort of paradox because it's starting to finally get its due. It's starting to finally get on the tourist trail a little bit, starting to spread. The news about the island is starting to spread, that it's this beautiful place. There's just gorgeous beaches, and it's a real surfing capital, so if you're into surfing, it's the place to be. And it's a funny thing because it's one of those, the classic trope about tourism is that, you want these places to stay somewhat hidden. You don't want them to become too popular because then they're going to be overrun with more people like me. But if you do get the chance, it's a pretty beautiful place. It has the most vibrant greens I've ever seen in my life. It's pretty spectacular. My guest today, once again, is my good friend Jordan Luke Collier. Jordan is head coach at the organization Ars Amorata, which does really amazing work centered around men's work, masculine purpose, and especially dating and relationships. It is a tremendous organization, and Jordan is a tremendously insightful human being, especially when it comes to the topics of sex, dating, and relationships. In today's episode, we're going a little deeper, though. We're talking about legacy, discovering masculine purpose, and we also get into some of our adventures and some of our travels and how that's changed and impacted us as men. Hope you enjoy it. I really enjoyed this discussion. I always enjoy talking to Jordan. And if you enjoyed it, please let me know. The best way you can do that, and the most helpful way for you to do that, would be to leave a rating and review of Humans in Love using Apple Podcasts or your podcast app of choice. Without any further ado, I present to you my latest conversation with my good friend, Jordan Luke Collier. I remember when we spoke, I think almost a year ago, I think it was in December of last year, similar to now, where I was asking you about how you approach, how are you planning the next year? How do you approach setting goals and things like that? And you just mentioned that you'd be interested in talking a little bit about legacy. And this is something I've been thinking about too. I think, with every year that passes, you realize in some ways you have less time to make your mark and to have the impact on the people you want to have the impact on, and to really stake your claim in the world as a man. Or as a human being. But what, when you say you want to talk about legacy, why? And what are you thinking about that these days? Why is that a topic that's of greater interest to you now than perhaps it was a year ago? Because I don't think you used that word in our conversation a year ago.
Legacy, no. It's definitely at the forefront of my thinking, and in the community of writers, speakers, coaches that I'm part of. There's a big conversation about legacy, and there's something a bit nebulous about it, like it's an ongoing inquiry, like the question, what is a good life? And anyone who is a practitioner of lifestyle design, quote unquote, knows that you don't just set up your perfect life once. You have to tend to it every single day like a plant, because whatever lifestyle you design for yourself, it gets cluttered with weeds and overgrown, and so there's a need to keep revisiting that. What is a good life? How do I want to live? How do I design my day? Minimalism is a constant pursuit of how can we remove everything that is unessential so we get back to the essential. And so legacy in a way, is one of those unanswerable questions, but fruitful inquiries. What is my legacy? What do I want to leave? What is the mark of a great man? What is my dharma? Like, why think up my legacy? But, from the egoic point, like, why the kind of Rockefeller or the tower, like, I want to build the biggest tower in the world and that will be my legacy. So everyone for, centuries is going to remember what a big dick I was. There's the ego sense of legacy, but there's also like, wow, even if I don't try and leave anything, what am I already leaving in my wake? And will any good come from the thumbprint that was my life on humanity? Something will come, and should something come, and if so, what? And so that there's all these very nebulous sounding questions, which very deep and very consuming and great to talk about. And that's really at the forefront of our conversation at the moment. And that'll evolve into something, and it's constantly shaping and forming me in the way I think as well.
Because it's a funny idea, this idea about legacy, because I was thinking, like, how many Roman emperors can you name? How many can I name? A handful? Yeah, maybe. And these were the most powerful men on the planet. If there was anybody that might have a legacy, it would be these men. But how many of them, we remember a handful and that's it. How many great books have stood the test of time? Works by Seneca, the Bible, Marcus Aurelius, people like that, but not a lot. And so, yeah, how to think about legacy? Because some people, I think, don't aim for legacy at all. Let's have the best time possible we can. Let's be a good person and let's whatever. But and frankly, legacy is something that drives me as well. When I think about people reading my book after I'm dead, I get a certain sense of motivation from that. No, I don't think necessarily from an ego place, at least not entirely, but also just, my life mattered. My life was helpful to some people in some way and has the potential to be helpful to people long after I'm gone. Yeah. But what does the word mean to you? When you think of the word legacy, what comes to mind for you?
I've got a clear, embodied, somatic, emotional connection with legacy. And I'll get to that. But my initial relationship with the word legacy is the thing that great heroic men, particularly men,
absolutely,
strive to leave. Yeah. And you either left one or you didn't. And if you did, it would be measured against all the others. So right. you want to leave the best one, basically. You don't want to be a forgotten Roman emperor. My legacy
is going to be better than yours, Jordan.
you don't want to be a Roman emperor that sucked, right?
Exactly.
So you're going to be the baddest. Yeah. Like, even if I kill and persecute, millions of people, at least I'll be up there with the tyrants.
At least you have your own chapter in the history books rather than a footnote.
Exactly. Yeah. Black legacy is better than, better than no legacy. But then what I see by that egoic kind of legacy in people is I literally need to finish my life with the 2 stone tablets with my pearly wisdom or my billions of dollars left in a way that people can see. And I will sacrifice the present moment so that my legacy will be left at the end of my life. And so that life in itself, because the end justifies the means can be horrific. So you can treat yourself badly, you can treat other people badly, you can live a life which is painful, which is not actually embodying any of your gifts while you're in the pursuit of actually leaving your gift. So let me think of an example of this. Yeah.
Just workaholics? People who work 80 hours a week for 40 years?
Yeah, for example, I'll give an example for myself. I do intimacy and relationship coaching, dating coaching. If I spend an entire year writing an amazing book about intimacy, but every single morning as I sat at the table on the balcony, my girlfriend wanted to give me a kiss and I'd be like, fuck off, I'm writing. Then none of what I'm actually standing for in the world is being embodied in the present moment. And we feel this all the time. Like, you can go to, oh man, so many examples, none come to mind. But yeah, like, go to, trying to think of a classic story. I don't know, like, for example, you go to the Nike factory, but everyone in there is like working so hard, none of them actually do any training.
None of them get outside and run on their shoes.
And you go and speak to the advertising committee for Nike or whatever, and you're like, when was the last time any of you guys went for a run? Oh yeah, we don't have any time for that shit. We're here to sell Nike shoes and try and press upon culture our vision for what life should be. So there's a fundamental disembodiment from the legacy by delaying it until later. And so a lot of these great men, it's like, okay, you left your stone tablets or your big building. How was the day-to-day living of your life? And were you embodying your gifts as you were fighting? Was your way of being imbued with the legacy that you want to leave as you were trying to create the thing that is the emblem of the legacy? And so I think a legacy means, it can mean a lot if you struggle and sacrifice yourself in one sense to leave a legacy. But in this day and age, there is like the quiet legacy of actually embodying the thing every single day. Like, and what I noticed for me, like, okay, what if the book writing time is twice as long, but every day when my girlfriend comes to give me a kiss in the morning, I turn my body and my attention fully to her, celebrate her, give her the best of me, spend some time with her, talk to her. There just becomes something a lot more embodied in my actual legacy. And when I come to write the book, it's imbued by this slow, oh yeah, my work was a bit slow because I was smelling the roses around me as I wrote this. And yeah, I mean, you're the CEO. No, you're a doctor. This is a great example, actually. You're a doctor because in your heart, you fundamentally want people to cure and be healthy, but you're so fucking stressed out on your daily rounds that you have very little empathy for your patients because your empathy is squashed underneath your stress. In your deepest heart, you want to be an amazing doctor. You want to be remembered like a Florence Nightingale, right? You want to be remembered and be beloved by your patients because you were there heart to heart to help them in a time of need. But you never once had that experience in a decade because all of your medical practice was shrouded by stress and the fear of government cuts and stress in the office, and then the sediment of annoyance in your body turns into being judgmental against the patients and so on. And so all of the patients in the ward, none of them feel seen. They all feel kind of served as objects of the practice of medicine. You know, they took my temperature and my blood pressure this morning, but I don't feel seen. The emotional healing doesn't come through. So you might be leaving your legacy as a doctor. Oh yeah, I got my certificate and I practiced for 30 years and I've got my retirement fund and I live my expensive lifestyle. But you didn't actually engage in the deep spiritual practice of medicine, which is to really give someone medicine is to give them the healing, the emotion. Like, I see you. Wow, you're suffering. What's that like? How can I be of service? How can I hear your story in a way that brings an emotional relief as well as the checking the pulse and the...
How is legacy and the way you're speaking about legacy, how does that differ from purpose? Because it seems to me that, some people would hear this and there's a part of me that hears this and thinks it sounds like you're talking about purpose. Is there something that I'm missing?
First thing that comes to mind, and I'm discussing a lot of this, for the first time with you, like on the fly. First thing that comes to mind is purpose feels like an internally generated thing. I wake up in the morning, wow, I feel this rush of I know what to do today. I'm going to hit the streets and feel good as I'm doing this. So I'm on purpose. And legacy is not just do I have a purpose and am I giving it, but it's real in the moment recognition of how my gifts and my actions affect all the people around me. So it's like, okay, I'm on my purpose. that's great, but it can be quite a self-focused orientation of moving forward. But then to be legacy minded is, okay, as I'm delivering my purpose, what difference is this making in the world right now? And why would I delay the gratification of seeing the effects of my labors until after the book is released, or after this 5-year cycle, or on December, or the Christmas party where we actually reflect on what we did this year? Like, why not daily reflect on the purpose? And maybe the experience, which I also know, of putting great content out, helping your clients with their challenges immeasurably, receiving great emails of gratitude. Oh, wow, that email's a bit long, I won't read that. Or, oh no, there's another compliment. Well, I'm too stressed to read the compliment. Yeah. And to have a lot of purpose, a lot of the time we're busting through and we're not taking in the fruits of our works as it happens. And that's what gives it the meaning. So I know I have a lot of coaching friends, other mentors. They pine to help other people because it feels so good. Wow, I helped you with your difficulty in your relationship. It feels so good to see you grateful and relieved from that pain and with strategies to come through. That's why we do it. Wow, that eased your pain. I helped your suffering. And that in and of itself fills my life with meaning. And yet we're, oh no, that's just my job. Don't sweat it. We don't accept the gratitude that comes to us in return from a lot of our works. I'm speaking squarely to people in helping professions right now. And legacy, to have a living legacy, one that you enjoy, is to be like, okay, these are the effects of my work, for good or for ill. My legacy right now is actually pissing a lot of people off. My legacy right now is, as I go about my business, I'm actually to the detriment of some people. Like, to be conscious of your effect as you go step by step. And so the core of legacy for me, this idea might change and bend with time, but there's a way of showing up in life that has us feel deeply given. And if we give our gifts and those gifts are received, we then can get touched and incredibly humbled by the fact that those gifts are received. One night it's going back about 5 years or so, I was doing a leadership training out in the States. I lived in the States for nearly a year. And we were all gearing up for certification. And I was a bit of a ringleader, and I gathered all of the students from the leadership program together as much as I could to practice, because we really needed to practice hard, because the certification had a high bar and risk of failure was high, and we just wanted to succeed. And I invited everyone around to practice, and we were a group of 4, group of 6, group of 8, whatever, practicing the techniques. It was a group facilitation leadership program. And there were some people in the group doing really, really well, and there were some people that just didn't get it. And I remember being one night, I was just showing up. I was really intent in serving the people that I was with, getting the certification while I was there, giving the best of myself. And there was just a few days in which I dropped into this zone of giving the best of me, completely in flow. And I had really memorable moments of connection with the people that I was working with. You know, when a project takes hold, like of work or some project, and you get caught up in it, it's like theatre is the best example of this, or a sports team. If you get on a run towards a cup, it's like, wow, like we're working together, we're achieving the thing. It's hard and challenging, but we're together. And in that, there's a transcendence, like we come together. And so one night, late at night, we were 3 people, the 3 last people in the building. And I was giving feedback to this guy who was trying to do his practice, and he was just not getting it. And I was giving feedback, and he was just not getting it. And it was like, wow, like, I think you probably won't certify, because there's quite some way to go for you to be able to get up to the standard. And I remember giving him feedback, heart open, head, just giving everything I could. And he left the building, and the woman that we were both with turned around to me and she said, I can count. She was in her 50s, like mid 50s already. She said, I could count on the fingers of one hand how many times in my life I've actually seen someone speak with so much intelligence and so much heart to another person out of pure service. Like, it's 11 o'clock at night, you don't have to be here, and you're giving all of that. She said it was mesmerizing just to watch your heart and your mind in action, in tandem, a human mind and a human heart together in tandem. And that hit him, you know, and she was touched and I was touched, and we left the building, and 11 o'clock at night, moon in the sky, stars and everything. And I checked my phone, and there was a message in my phone from the girl that I was seeing. And it was literally like, hey babe, I miss you. Come around. I'm in bed. The back door is open. Wink, wink.
Oh, wow. You could read a lot into that last sentence.
And so I look at that message, and all I can feel in all of me is, that's the perfect message for any man to be sent at 11 o'clock at night.
Doesn't get much better than that.
It doesn't get much better than that. And the counterintuitive thing that I felt in that moment was, you know what, if I actually followed up that message and went round and went in the back door and all so on, that would be a notch down from the level of purity I feel in my heart and my soul right now. Like, I'm so given to these people, and it was so beautiful what I've given today. No woman, no invitation can match up to the purity of spirit that I feel. And with that, I quietly walked home under the moon and the stars, and I just moved into a new place. So it was a 20-minute walk home, and I got there and I didn't yet have a bed. I'd rented it was like a little house at the bottom of the garden, and I slept on 2 yoga mats. And so it's like bone aching poverty, you know, 2 yoga mats on a wooden floor. And I just slept with my head on my hands, like looking up to the ceiling, like, wow, I don't need anything else. And you asked me when we first met, Jordan, what are your business metrics and your targets? And I was like, well, the only thing that comes to mind is the number of times that I cry in a calendar year, like tears come to my eyes because of how deeply I served other people through my work. Like, if I can cry from gratitude and service 10 times in a calendar year because of how I gave myself to my work, that would have been a good year.
Not found in most business plans.
The real bottom line, the spiritual bottom line of work, of business.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like, you know, we were talking just this weekend about business and the kind of work that we do. And I mean, without question, it's such a cliche, but the more you give, the more you receive. And the more you just really focus as much as possible as, how can I provide as much value as possible to this person or this community or these people? I mean, it can't help but have a positive impact on your business. And I think particularly in the internet age, and I think particularly for people who do the kind of work that you and I are interested in, where we're doing podcasts like this and we have videos on YouTube or whatever, I mean, people are going to know pretty quickly who we are. And I think most people, they're going to smell bullshit. You know, when you put out as much content as you and I put out, you know, where there's hours of you speaking online, there's hours of me speaking online. People can tell pretty early on, oh, these people are actually sincere. I don't think they have all the answers, but at least they're being sincere. And yeah, I think you're right. The more you can just focus on service and giving and just providing as much value as you can. I mean, yeah.
I'm sniggering because that is true what you say. And at the same time, everyone can smell your insincerity and you can still become prime minister. Yeah. So it's not it's not a foolproof system that goodness prevails.
But I feel like, I don't know, I guess I would slot people like you and I in a different category than politicians. You know, I mean, the most insincere person in the history of the planet just, got elected president last time. So yeah, but I don't know. I guess I feel like if you're doing any kind of quote unquote heart-centered work, I think it's pretty tough to be a charlatan in that world for long. I think people will suss you out.
Yeah.
I think.
But, if you're a charlatan, then the one who suffers most is you, basically, at the end of the day. And that's why we want to have this conversation about legacy, because a lot of men come to us and some of them have been very successful in business, but just because you've got an 8 or a 9-figure business doesn't mean that you actually feel meaning in your heart. And meaning can be very elusive. And if the part of you that longs for meaning in life is shut down or has a defense, or you've just never been trained to get in touch with meaning, there's a void. Yeah. There's a real void. And it's invaluable to get access to that. And that's why people, like the Bill Gates of the world become these, I don't know how many figures of millions, billionaires, become a multi-billionaire. And then it's like, wow, I have all this money, but like, what else? And then they find philanthropy, and it's like, okay, now I can buy myself into meaning.
Yeah. Well, it's funny, like people, this is a bit of a side note or tangent, but I mean, you and I live in Chiang Mai, which is this city that attracts literally thousands of people working online from all over the world. And it attracts a wide spectrum of people doing different things. And I'm not trying to be judgmental or whatever. I think that you can find great meaning in many different types of work, whether you're a server in a restaurant or a carpenter or a lawyer or whatever. I mean, there can be great meaning to be found in a lot of those things. But for example, I was talking to a guy today about professional poker players. And I'm not talking shit. I mean, if that makes them happy, fine. But I think for me, if the meaning, like you'd have to find it some other way, I think. Yeah. If you're a millionaire pressing buttons on a screen and playing cards online, maybe it's just the type of personality that you and I are. Like, I think we take certain truths for granted. Maybe it's not as important for everyone. But I feel like if I was some millionaire poker player, you'd have to find meaning somewhere else, wouldn't you?
Yeah, we've worked with a few poker players, funnily enough, and it's and they were really, really searching for beauty, connection, and meaning. And it's like the very practice of poker is you have to train your face to not give away any clues.
Right, poker face, right? Yeah, literally.
So then take that skill and then go into your dating life and see if women feel you and trust you.
That's so interesting.
So poker is...
And your livelihood depends on the quality of your poker face.
Exactly. So if you're a millionaire poker player, you have actually undergone the very training that's going to be very difficult for you to have. And you've been rewarded
for your complete lack of emotional transparency.
And then the head is constantly just the way of playing poker is you're doing little mental formulations in your mind all the time. So it's like, do I go in or do I not? It trains physically, emotionally, mentally, this way of calculating risk at every single step. And so love is not a risk that you calculate with your mind, because you'll be stuck in your mind forever. It's so unpredictable, like what to do with that force of emotion. And so I don't want to damn the world of poker. I mean, it's brilliant. And
I play poker.
And you can be a professional poker player and have a very meaningful family life outside it.
Well, that's what I mean, though. I think you'd have to find it somewhere else, like in your family or in your community or something.
But it's interesting, the man who can be the consummate millionaire poker player on one part of his life and then go home and be an amazing lover and father. Right. That's quite a breadth of skills that he must have mastered.
I'd like to meet that guy. That sounds like an interesting man. Yeah. How do you feel pretty clear about your legacy at this moment in time? And B, what has helped you or helps you get greater clarity around that, would you say?
Yeah. Going off to the mountains on a motorbike with people like yourself helps me get greater clarity on legacy. Likewise. That's for sure. Time away to think, because it is a minimalist activity. What is clutter here? What is inessential? How can I get rid of that so I can give my gift more fully? And so there's like, in my heart, soul, and body, I know what my legacy is. And because I've had certain experiences of giving my gifts and being received and seeing that I'm received, and just the walk home alone at night and weep tears of gratitude on my wooden floor type because I've had numerous nights like that. I know what my legacy is. I know what my gifts are. I know when I'm touching people. I know when lives are changing because of the influence that our conversations and our work are having. So I know what my legacy is in my body. But then my head has its moments of like, where am I going to be next year? Oh, wow, I'm coming up to the end of my visa allowance in this country, so I need to make a plan. What is my plan for next year? Well, why make a plan for next year? I need to make a 5-year plan and then a 10-year plan. And then where am I going to go? And so how shall I structure my work so that I can do that? And all of these logistical complications along the way put me right back in my head and have me try and calculate my legacy again. Yeah. So my body and my heart knows what my legacy is. It's been hit, bullseye a number of times. I know where that lies. That's true for some people. You might not have had that moment of I was fully given today. And if not, the hunt for your legacy or the hunt for your purpose must continue until you really know what your best gifts are, and you know that they've landed a few times, that you know that you've affected humanity or culture by bringing your essence. Once you've collected a few experiences like that, I think a woman too, knows themselves on a very deep level, and that creates the structure for building a life's work and going forward. Until you've had that experience, you've got to hunt it, got to hunt it, got to hunt it. And I'm bringing a high bar for what kind of work you should be doing in the world, but rightly so. If you're a seeker, nothing less than these moments of total meaning and fulfillment are going to satisfy you.
Yeah. It's funny too. I mean, I've had conversations with people in bars or people you meet on the road traveling or whatever. And the conversation at some point will come around to professions and whatever. And it's something I like talking about because I'm a curious dude, and I want to know what it's like to be a carpenter or to be a banker or to be a construction worker or whatever. And I hope this doesn't come off as patronizing. I think people can tell I'm sincere, but I've had the experience a few times where someone tells me what they do. Oh, I'm just a waitress or whatever. And my immediate impulse is, but wow, like you help people eat, like you feed people, and you have enormous power to impact their day. I don't say that because that would be really preachy and over the top. But you have a tremendous amount of power. Like I've always had this romantic idea of my alternative, one of my unlived lives as a carpenter, actually building structures that can stand for 10, 20, 30, 40, 100 years where people live. Like you're sheltering people, you're helping people stay dry and warm, and you're creating environments where people have Christmases. And so I think that it seems to me, because people like you and I, we're so incredibly fortunate to live the lives that we're leading, living in tropical countries and doing work that we find really empowering and really meaningful and really deeply satisfying and exciting, working on these creative projects that have great meaning for us. And I've had the experience of talking to people when they kind of shrug off their job, but, I just always have a different perspective on it often. And obviously I can't pretend to know what that's like, but I just, from the outside looking in, it's like, I think that there's great meaning to be derived in many different types of work. I think sometimes it might just take a slight perspective shift. And that's easy for me to say because I'm not a waitress or I'm not a carpenter. I'm not these things, I'm not a truck driver. But it seems to me that Jesus, the world relies on these people to live, society relies on these people to make everything work, to feed us, to clothe us, to transport our goods. It's really important. There's deep meaning to be found in those types of work.
You can own that as well.
Yeah.
Our culture blows up, the whole story of the rags to riches or the entrepreneur or the person with the amazing mission statement. My mission in life is to save 10 billion people from, it's not even 10 billion people, but,
that's an ambitious goal.
Yeah, my life purpose is to save 10 billion people from poverty and AIDS and all the rest of it. And so the rest of us who are not quite as lofty feel like there's something deficient because culture is celebrating, he or she with a big mission statement. But as we engage in that story, like your value comes from the size of your mission, or your value comes from the clarity of your purpose, we overlook that the immense humble beauty of a waitress who actually is in his or her heart and actually cares about your eating experience, or actually shares a couple of jokes or a little flirtation or a sincere question. I mean, are you kidding?
And in some of those moments, I mean, some of those moments you're talking about, I feel like they've kind of saved my life in some ways, you know, because you've dealt with some loss in the past year, significant loss, and I have as well. And I found, particularly when I've been in the midst of intense grief and just my heart's blown wide open and I'm feeling extremely vulnerable and maybe lonely and all of these things, just little moments of people being kind to me or being a little flirtatious or being whatever, just little moments of genuine kindness they can, you know, they resonate throughout my entire day and sometimes my week, you know, just those little moments of seeing the goodness in people and remembering that it's a big world and there's lots of people who, you know, people who are far less fortunate than me in many ways, who are still, you know, working and taking a little time out of their day to be unnecessarily kind to me. I mean, those moments can save your life sometimes, at least in my experience. Those little moments where someone's extra nice to me and they didn't have to be, you know, whether it's a server in a restaurant or a bartender or whoever, I mean, those can have a huge impact on people, you know. I've thought about that before. Like, I remember being on a couple of flights where the flight attendant, and I was just in economy, you know, I wasn't like a first class passenger or anything, but where the flight attendant was just nice to me, you know, genuine smile. I could tell she took her work seriously. It wasn't like the thing of putting on a fake corporate smile, and just, you could tell that she was a genuinely kind person and she just genuinely wanted to be nice. I've thought about, you know, after the flight, just going up to these people and saying, thank you, like genuinely, thank you for making my experience so pleasant, because you didn't have to do that. And it had a big impact on me, you know, truly. Yeah. And that is, those moments have really influenced me to try to be unnecessarily kind to people when I can, you know, really appreciate people's food. And, you know, you and I live in Thailand, you know, like these little restaurants, I almost always go out of my way to tell them how much I enjoyed the meal and that it was delicious or whatever, and really genuinely thanking people. And obviously I don't always live up to that. I have grumpy days just like everyone else, but yeah, unnecessary kindnesses can really, you know, yeah, you talk about legacy, like that ripples through the world, because then she's maybe this woman's going to be nicer with her kids that night, and maybe the kids are going to have a better mood at school the next day, and whatever, you know, you can kind of imagine that this has the potential to ripple through the whole little community in kind of a beautiful way.
I think you've perfectly defined my idea of legacy. Because your stone tablets will be, you know, your best book on Amazon is going to be ignored perpetually among the crowds,
among the 30 million other books on there.
And if you are chronically, and this is for me myself, you know, I've got to remember this own teaching for myself in my own life. If you are chronically closing down because you want to focus on your like your stone tablets or your self kind of actualization project, if I complete this book or this business or do this thing, then I will feel good and whole and complete. If you're involved in that project, but you're not willing to look at the waitress or thank her for her service, or console someone when you see that they're in pain, or do these very little human acts of kindness, then I think we're failing in some respects to live a greater legacy. And that in itself leads to a suffering. Yeah. And you talked about the phenomena of being in a tropical country with an online business and working with passions. Even that being the case, it's so easy to get stuck in the mind pattern of, I want to accomplish this, that, and the other, and forgetting a deeper human need, which is much more nourishing, which is the simple connection, simple kindness, simple being connected to the surroundings around us.
Absolutely. This might tie in nicely your ideas about legacy with, do you know the Buddhist teacher Jack Kornfield? Have you heard of him?
Just by name,
yeah.
Not by teaching. He's
terrific. He has this great line. He says, tend to the part of the garden you can touch. If you're trying to have an impact in the world, tend to the part of the garden you can touch. I really like that formulation, because we each have a garden. Like, we each have a little community of people we interact with. Some of us have more than others, but there's people we interact with. And, you know, if there's ways that we can impact them in a positive way, why not? Because again, it ripples through, throughout the whole community, often in very tangible ways.
So I have a question for you, Zach.
I'm ready.
And I wonder if you want to publicly say anything about your upcoming year and your travels. And where are you going and what's it all about?
What's it all about?
And what are you looking for on the winding roads?
Wow, the long and winding road? That's a good question. I guess by the time I publish this episode, I'll be in the Philippines, which I'm excited about because apparently Christmas there is just absolutely crazy in the best way possible. So I'm excited about that. We're talking about kindness earlier. One consistent thing that comes up when I tell people I'm going to the Philippines is they say that people are just incredibly kind and generous, and every Filipino I've ever met has been often unnecessarily kind. So that I'm excited about being there for a while. And after that, it's kind of a question mark. I'm going to go back to Thailand for a while in January to see a friend and go to a concert. And after that, there's a big question mark. You and I have talked about Mexico and Argentina and Uruguay and parts of Russia, parts of Europe rather. And I think I just came to a point where it's just time for a bit of a change of scenery.
Because you've been living in Chiang Mai.
I've been based here for a while, yeah, with a lot of travel, especially over the past year. I've traveled a lot, but I mean, I've had this apartment for a while now, and I've been based here for a while. And I think I talk about Chiang Mai in the podcast all the time. I mean, it's an absolutely wonderful place to live. Again, incredibly kind people in northern Thailand. Just, for anyone whose their only experience of Thailand has been the south, not that there aren't kind people down there. In general, Thais are it's a very welcoming place. But from my experience, it's been next level in the north in terms of feeling welcomed. And that really means something when you're an expat, when you're living abroad. And so I guess I just came to a place where I want to come back and feel excited about Chiang Mai again, because I imagine I will come back next year at some point. So I think I just needed some time to sort of hit the road and immerse myself in some new environments and meet new people and we'll see. There's a lot of uncertainty about next year and where I'm going to physically be, and it's exciting. It's exciting to kind of just hit the road and not have an official apartment for a while and just, It's
hit exciting. The road, Zach.
Don't you come back. Oh, that was so corny, but I'll overlook that.
If you're a waitress,
okay,
working in a restaurant,
can I be a waiter?
I'm talking to the listeners.
Oh, right.
But if you're a waitress in the Philippines or in Mexico or in Argentina or
flirt
Uruguay,
with me. I'll appreciate it. I promise. I'll probably flirt with you.
Show Zach some of your gentle everyday kindness.
Absolutely.
I think it's funny, all those countries that you just mentioned, and you said that Thais are welcome in general, which I feel, and yet the welcome that I've received in Mexico, I lived in Argentina for a year. I've been in Uruguay just a few days, Mexico. I imagine Philippines as well, the Latin, Spanish welcome.
Yeah.
I work with mainly English people, actually Americans and so on as well, but a lot of my conversation is with my fellow Brit, and we are not so exposed to that level of welcome and kindness on a day-to-day basis. It's just the way that the culture's been shaped. There's a lot of competition in our generation, and we've got to take care of ourselves, and it's not bad people, but that shell and that walls have been... I don't think I would have ever become or found within myself the generosity and the kindness and the love that I'm able to access now if I hadn't spent significant time in that Latin part of the world. Because that unconditional inclusivity that I felt, particularly in Argentina, Mexico too, warms my heart to this day. And I feel that some of the hard edges of my own cultural shaping were shaved off by living there and infused within me something new.
I completely agreed. I told you I lived in Colombia for 6 months.
Yeah.
Did I tell you about the night that I landed in Medellin?
No.
So I had a long flight I went from Chile to Ecuador to Colombia. And I arrived in the city of Medellin in Colombia it was probably around 11 o'clock at night. And rocked up in my hostel, and I could see that the streets were just teeming with people. It was like this massive, massive street party. And I asked the owner of the hostel, like, what's going on? They said the local football team just won the league championship tonight. You should go downtown and check it out. So I did. And it was thousands and thousands and thousands of cheering Colombians in the street, throwing up in the air. I think it's like it's like a white powdery stuff. It's like cornstarch or something. It was then people were painting their faces with it and stuff and just screaming and hollering. And I ended up at several bars with random Colombians I just met. I remember several women grabbed me, gave me these massive kisses and stuff, and then just walked on their way. This happened several times. People pouring me shots of aguardiente, getting me all liquored up. I think I got back to the hostel around 8 o'clock the next morning, and that was my first night in Colombia.
Wow.
And I was ruined. After that, it was like, I love Colombia.
No kidding. Talk about a welcome.
Yeah, but it's funny you say that too, because when I think about 6 months in Colombia, and that changed me for sure. Yeah, in probably some similar ways to what you're describing. Yeah, that sense of inclusivity and spontaneous joy and yeah. And just, I mean, this is such a cliche, but I mean, God, I think my years of travel have shaped me in ways that I can't even begin to describe. But so I'm excited. But what about you? You're not quite sure what your plan is for 2020 is in terms of your location.
Very sure. Just got to take care of some details.
Okay.
Yeah. But one of the things, to go right back to the beginning of this podcast, one of the things that's grown and stretched me this year relationally is they say about a relationship that it's not 1 + 1 = 2, that if you've got a good relationship, it's like 1 + 1 = 10. The amount that two people can generate with a great loving bond is like beyond the sum of the parts. Yeah. But also when you go traveling in a relationship, it's not just 1 + 1 = 2, it's 1 + 1 = 10. So the amount of suitcases that has to be transported and visa issues that need to be taken care of and personal needs, they don't just get doubled, but they get magnified. And all of a sudden it's like, yeah, we're a couple and we're a little family and we're moving around the world. And so we want to take things slower and we want to have less unpredictability. And all the things that my whole life was predicated on before, adventure, novelty, newness, we don't want so much of that. We want stability. We want a safe base and home in which we can feel good and nourished and productive, a place from which we can start to provide a legacy from. And talking about the traveling to lots of different countries, I've been given so much by some of the cultures that I've been in. And a lot of the time in those cultures where I receive so much, I didn't give so much in return. Because as the perpetual traveler, I can give some things of myself, but not that much. I'm kind of in need of being sustained and supported by local people. And I took a lot of hospitality. And my life, I think, for 2020 looks like a life of home building and foundation making and nest building. And it doesn't mean not traveling, because we're going to have a creative, fun way of doing this. Like, where do we want residences around the world, and how do we want to build ourselves community in these different places that we love? But it's definitely a slower, more mindful, more giving way of adventure.
On that note, like, I don't know about in the UK so much, but I think it's a lot of people in North America, when they talk about relationships, they say don't marry someone if you haven't lived with them first, because you won't get a sense of who they are until you really inhabit the same space. I think don't marry someone until you've traveled with them. Don't you think? In weird foreign countries where neither one of you speaks the language, and you're both jet lagged, and you're both in desperate need of a shower, and you missed your bus, and it's raining, and you don't know where the hotel is, and
that's what they say. 3 months of dating equals 2 weeks of living together equals 1 day of traveling. I tell you what really switched something in my mind with Adelia, with my relationship. We'd been together about 6 months or so, and I had a few question marks about her, like how much difficulty can this woman sustain and maintain a sense of character?
In terms of more practical difficulties? Yeah,
just difficult, like emotional and physical, like difficulty and turmoil and unpredictability and nastiness and all that shit, of traveling and not showering and so on. Test of character. How much can she sustain and not fold and then start blaming me and then quit the relationship? And she's had her own inner tests of me, like, what am I accountable for ultimately? And so we did a vision quest. Like, one of our big coaching events last year involved a 9-day vision quest in France, and 4 of those days and nights we spent on top of the mountain. And so as a group leader, I had the 10 guys go out for their vision quest, and they were scattered all in a forest and a mountainside in France, all of them just on their own in little hammocks, facing nature. When you do a vision quest, it's like no eating, no drinking for 4 days and 4 nights. You have your little stone circle on the floor, you sit in the middle of it and you pray to the spirit all day. Please, great spirit, reveal to me the vision of my life and what I should be doing on this earth. So that's the vision quest. And we were leading that process. And on day 3, I said to my girlfriend, listen, do you want to go and see the mountain and have a day of vision quest? And she's like, yeah, but not alone. I want to go with you. So we decided we were going to have a vision quest date. And all of the participants are scattered on the mountain in their deep spiritual life purpose contemplation. And Adelia and I go on a little walk, and it's 45 minutes from the house to the mountain. And then we go into the mountain and we decide that we're going to spend the night together. And I know the perfect spot to get to, because it's like a ledge on a cliff top overlooking this river valley, exposed underneath the full moon. And we did it on the full moon with the forest behind us. It was like exquisite, like how to sit with a woman and have a romantic evening, right? And none of the vision questers had chosen that particular spot in the valley, so it was free for us. Convenient. So the whole time I was like, wow, when she sees the spot, she's just going to melt. It's like, nothing more romantic than this. And so we got to the bottom of the mountain, and I said to her, listen, babe, it's going to take like 25 minutes to climb up to the spot where we're going to spend the night, but you need to promise me that you don't say a word. And if it's a little bit in pain, or you're not enjoying it, or if it's hard, like, I can't hear a single word out of you. And she's very transparent and vocal, and if she doesn't like something, she'll say something, so that she makes noise, my sweet girl. But I told her no, because sound travels upwards. Even if you say Jordan like that, the echoes of that are going to go out, and it's all the guys are going to hear it. It's going to interrupt their process, and they'll be like, who's on the mountain and where are they going? We don't want to take them out of meditation on day 3 of their fasting process. They're in it. They're cooking, these guys. So be quiet. And we climbed up the hill. And anyway, after about 25 minutes, we were not even halfway up. The sun had gone down and it was starting to get dark. The ground was way more slippery than it was from when I remembered that particular track a month before. And what was a 25-minute simple walk up the mountain was like an hour and a half long. Where the fuck are we? I don't know where we're going to sleep. I've got thorns in me in 10 different angles. It was getting really hairy. And honestly, I was nervous. Like, my heart was beating like, what the fuck am I doing with this woman who's just trusting me blindly and cannot speak to me? And we finally found the clearing and got there. But I was scared by this point, and it was pitch black, and all we could hear around the valley were the howls of coyotes.
Romantic. Yeah.
And naturally, we took a couple of blankets and sleeping mats, but not enough clothes, and the temperature got cold. And we laid there on this ledge, and we're sleeping on one camping mat. Half of my body is just on the rock. and we've got blankets but not enough, and we're freezing, and we're just huddled up against each other with these howls of coyotes in the background, imagining that we should be enjoying the full moon under the light of the stars and the moon, and it's not happening at all. I'm like shit scared, and she's unable to speak or complain.
Wow.
And then the sun comes up in the morning, and there's like relief that we made it through the night, and then we get...
But she held her tongue.
She held her tongue the entire way. And we got out the other side, and as soon as we moved away from the mountain pass and started walking down towards the home, she like... when she could open her mouth, she went like apeshit ballistic, like all the repressed emotional sediment of the night before, like just came at me, and I smiled and I took it. I was like, you're right. How can I complain? But you're amazing. Like, you're so vocal at complaining about the things that you don't like in life. Like, the whole 6 months we've been together, like,
you shut the hell up.
You made it very clear when you've been unsatisfied with me.
Yeah.
And yet, when I asked you to be quiet in service of my men who were on the mountain and couldn't be interrupted, you had the character to spend an entire night in complete fear and uncertainty. I, as your leader, was in fear. And you could feel that the whole time. And you still could keep your mouth closed and not complain and hold your tongue when it really mattered. And in that moment, she went up so high in my estimations as like, this is a woman with character. Like, wow, you know? Yeah. And people talk about character as a masculine trait, as man of character, but it's fundamentally like for a woman to have that kind of character, to not buckle or, get all precious and girly and I don't like this and I want to go, take me out now, and get all demanding in the middle of fire.
Yeah.
No.
That's
amazing.
Impressive.
Amazing.
Yeah. No, that would be impressive for sure. Yeah. Good for her. Good for her. So Jordan, what's the best place people can connect with you on the web?
A couple of different places. So you can find me at jordanlukecollier.com and find out a little bit about me. I spend most of my time running group programs, exploring masculinity, intimacy, and now legacy. And I'm on YouTube, forthcoming podcast, which is going to be on the way as well. So you can type my name into YouTube and find some of my stuff as well. And then if you want to know about the work that I do with Ars Amorata, we're a collection of writers and coaches and speakers and travelers and poets. It's the lover archetype approach to lovers, to life and to being men on this earth in the 21st century. If you're interested in that work, you can go to arsamorata.com and find out more about our collective efforts.
Excellent. And again, I can heartily endorse Ars Amorata and Jordan, of course. Jordan, my friend, my brother on this very strange path that we're walking, thank you for coming over and giving me your time today again.
It's been an epic 3 years, brother. We've done one a year for 3 years.
Next year, man. Next
wow.
December.
Maybe you'll get snapped up by a Mexican waitress. That's where my money lies at the moment.
That's good.
I'll see you in another part of the world.
All right, brother. I hope you enjoyed today's episode of Humans in Love. If you'd like to learn more about my guests, my work, or you'd like to listen to back episodes of the podcast, please visit humansinlove.com. If you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to Humans in Love using your podcast app of choice. If you're a fan of Humans in Love, and you'd like to help keep the show going and help me spread the word, please take 30 seconds out of your day to leave a rating and review on Apple Podcasts or your podcast app of choice. Before I let you go, remember that life is short, so let's make it count. And thank you, as always, for your listenership and support. I'll talk to you again very soon.